So hello and good day. I am delighted you joined me for this webinar. I'm going to share some tools, some resources, some frameworks about how to create inclusive teams from the start, how to create inclusive classrooms from the start. And while those are different, my intent is there's a lot of overlap. And as I was preparing for this, I was surprised how much overlap there is, particularly if you are working with teachers in a supervisory development role. And if you're working with staff and faculty in that role, then you might find some of the team suggestions useful. And for folks in organizations that have a department, a team, and you're thinking, what can I learn about a classroom? Well, to be honest, I believe every meeting should be a workshop. But my guess is you also do trainings, you do retreats, or other people do. And so it'll probably about half and half, but I do think there'll be information for everyone to pull, if not using now, in the near future. Hello, I'm Kathy Aubert, and I use she, her pronouns. And I just want us all to take a deep breath and just ground in the areas you are and the lands, and just remember the original custodians, the original indigenous peoples who are in your area. Here in Denver, the Arapaho. And I just want to acknowledge the lands that I get to be on today. So as we think about how to create inclusive teams, inclusive classrooms, it might be useful to think about, are there some signs that I should be paying more attention? Too often when I was a manager, even when I was teaching, I would just get right to content, right to task. Now that's pretty white culture of me to think task and not think about the process of learning, the process of engagement on teams. So I have about a few of these. Are you feeling like you're going round and round? You're in class discussions, you're in team meetings, but you don't seem to be making much progress. Or you find the climate is his fault, her fault, their fault. Oh, it's not me. So a kind of a blame and shame culture. That could be a clue. It's time to do more team building or classroom development. Do you find you thinking you're this surfer, you're riding the wave and wow, things are going good. My first few sessions of the class here in the 8th grade, the first week's going great, but all of a sudden, boom, there's a crash because we didn't invest in the time to build that learning environment, that classroom container that can withstand conflict, disagreement, people not knowing each other. They've got to know each other. Or you just feel like you're going around and around in circles as a teacher, as a team leader. You're working so hard, you're putting a lot out, but nothing seems to change. There's a little learning, there's a little more productivity, but you're like, we kind of feel we're not moving very far. Or you're very clear, if you can see this, there's a blue destination. That's where we're supposed to go. But the GPS is taking you someplace else. So you've got the strategic vision, but your team doesn't know. You're in the classroom, you know what you want to teach, but somehow the students aren't following you. Or people are unsure, confused about what we're doing, where we want to go, why we're here. And we haven't gotten clear on that. And all this interrupts learning, and it also interrupts productivity. Or you feel like this. Now, I'm doing lately asking people which one is their favorite, and the cow wins. But I really relate to stuck in the mud. I know where I want to go. I have my destination on GPS, but I just can't get going. Or when I learned to ski, literally I didn't ever learn, but when I tried to ski when I was 18 in Michigan, that's what I looked like. I kept falling head on. But this is what teams are like. This is what leadership can feel like. And clearly when I was teaching in the classroom and in my workshops, sometimes this is what it feels like. Another way you can know you need to do more development for your classroom or your team is if people are watching the clock. They're like, how much longer till we can get out of here? How much longer till I can get home? Or you're having people doing many different activities and it's actually frenetic. The classroom is pretty active and people are doing things, but again, not progress. The team isn't moving forward to the end. You feel like you're getting it a lot done, but you really aren't. Or you're doing so much, you're exhausted already. We're starting the new year, we're starting the new term, and you're like, oh, it's the beginning of a new quarter, and this is an important quarter, but I'm exhausted, and what can I do? I'm running on empty. And so you're now wondering what? So I haven't found a magic pill for deep, really entangled organizational dynamics, but these strategies and activities can help teams that are in relatively okay, good shape get a refresh, a restart, a refocus, and to start a classroom from the beginning, whether you're KP, or I guess it's PK, all the way up to 12, whether you're in community college whether you're in undergraduate, graduate programs, I believe these tools and strategies can be useful to start the semester off right. And as I said, to revise and reimagine and recommit to what team effectiveness could do. So no matter where you're working, you can shift unproductive dynamics proactively and set the container for people to be able to be thinking about how do we want to engage as a team. Now, if you're in the classroom, it's like you're planting a new garden. You're like, what do I want where, what plants? We actually just did this summer. And intentionally, how much water do they need? And so you're just being very intentional so you have a bountiful harvest. If you're a team, you've already probably got a garden. And so it's about weeding and teaching people how to weed themselves, how to look for dynamics in the work environment that need weeding, and how do we get refocused. So here's what we're doing. For folks in the classroom, how do you see all students, help them see themselves in the work that you do? And so whether that is how you do the content of the course, how you do the images you use, the bulletin boards, how you use the slides in your PowerPoints, the stories you tell, how do you clearly set expectations for engaged learning so that you accelerate the learning of everyone, student success for everyone. It's not just individual learning. We are here together collaboratively helping people move. And part of that is helping people recognize that there could be microaggressions, those daily indignities, those comments and actions that happen that leave our students feeling invisible, not valued, not belonging, comments that have them maybe reinforcing societal stereotypes. They're not as smart, they're deficient. And that can come from us and an unconscious bias, and can come from the other students, and it can be in the content, the research, the readings, the book we're using. And so we have to be very conscious before we start. How do we help people minimize those in the moment, but also in the work that we're presenting to have them learn? I'll share a little bit about how to create proactively respectful dialogue and a few strategies in the moment. My September and October, so the next two I'm doing, are on navigating difficult situations, how to create the container for those, and then in the moment, what do you do, and how do you navigate yourself when you hit a hot button or a trigger. So I'm just going to give you a little bit today, and the next two webinars and virtual institutes will be so focused on those. And finally, how do you help them create the capacity to navigate difficult conversations? So that's what we're going to be doing as we do Inclusive Classroom. That'll be the first half. Second half, we'll be looking at teams. And so the webinar is how to create and revitalize the outcomes for inclusive teams. Now, before I do that, some of the teachers and faculty might be listening to go, now, wait a minute, it's not my job. It's my job to help people learn. And so I teach content. And when I was trained in K-12, I was so focused on the content. And to be fair, I didn't get much training on how to create an inclusive classroom. Actually, I didn't get it at all. I wasn't asked to look at my possible biases, my internalized dominance, and all my privilege, the ways that I show up not believing in myself and imposter syndrome from my own internalized marginalization. And I was not taught about breadth of differences, privilege, marginalized, all the work that we've been doing in the first 6 webinars that I have that, again, you can get for free and download. And so I might not have watched this webinar, much less if I was on it. I'd be like, I'm supposed to be teaching history. And the truth is, today I know students cannot learn if there are microaggressions in the classroom. They cannot learn if in the moment when they speak, somebody calls them stupid. They cannot learn if it's a chilly classroom where they don't see themselves in the content, they don't see themselves in my stories, and if I'm not paying attention to the current dynamics that are happening around them. And so I do believe it's our job to increase learning by having an inclusive, belonging classroom. But more than that, if I invest in creating an inclusive classroom now, then when there are dynamics that feel like, then people have more tools and skills, and we have an engaged agreement that how we're going to interact with each other. And so it saves times and energy, and you're not sending as many people to discipline because we're able to contain it in the classroom. And they're not missing the class content because they're out, right? And you're not maybe sending the people to discipline disproportionately based on race or class of origin, which, you know, that's what the data shows. And so create greater inclusion because it's our job, because we're not only teaching the content, we're teaching life skills, we're teaching career skills. So whether that's PK to 12, college or beyond, we are teaching folks the skills they're going to need to be citizens in whatever countries they are, to be community members, to be active, engaged, incredible learners, and wherever they are in their business, if they go into teaching, if they go into some community work, if they're in wherever they do in their lives, work, development, career, life skills. And so that's what this is all about. It is our job. So let me go back for a minute, talking about teams. What we're going to do with teams, how do you deepen the capacity? Whether you have a new committee, a new task force, a new department, so you're brand new as the leader, or you've been the leader for a while, but you've added new members. Every time you add somebody, it's a whole new group. Or you just want to hit refresh and restart. It's the beginning of your fourth quarter. It's a great time to just have people refocus because you probably have end of the year goals you're needing to meet and you may not be as close as you want to be. So how do you deepen capacity to help your team revitalize, enhance their performance? To learn to value and leverage diversity among all team members and all they serve? How do you get them to co-create and reinforce learning norms, group guidelines, working engagement agreements to ensure true creativity, innovation, collaboration, customer service? You want to refocus everyone's efforts on the core mission, the values, and similarly to the classroom, recognize microaggressions, interrupt them so you build trust, teamwork, not undermine it, and finally navigate conflict. So again, the content will be similar. I'll be adding back and forth, but I hope you get a lot out of each one. Before I move on, I just had this thought that some team leaders or supervisors right now say it's not my job to create an inclusive team or inclusive environment. These are adults. I hired them, I pay them. Well, we pay them what we pay them. Sometimes it's not a living wage. But it is our job. If we don't have a high-performing team, if we don't have inclusion, if we don't have people knowing each other so that when there's conflict, there's a relationship within which to have the conversation and not a fight. Ow, that hurt, by the way. Not debating, not putting you down, but, this is interesting. Let's see each other's perspectives and how to move forward. So it is our job. In fact, it might be one of the most important things we do to help people, empower them to get their job done, have greater inclusion, greater skill building to do that. So how I do this work, I will do about 60, 65, 70 minutes of sharing ideas, and then we'll have some Q&A. And any Q&A we don't do, I will probably keep recording, and then we'll send that out as well. These webinars are intended to be for you to kind of get the concepts and the ideas, and if you're already have a team that's ready to go and you're ready to go, you can start using them. I also have these 3-hour virtual institutes, and that's how you can learn more about them. And that will be on August 30th. Live workshops with me while I will run these activities. And so you can bring together teachers, you can bring together development or people who do teaching. So I'm sorry, the faculty developing people, teaching supervisors, principals, bring together the folks in faculty development if you're on a campus. You can bring together team leaders. You can bring together a team, people from HR, because here's what you're going to get. You're going to watch me how to do it. And so if they've seen the webinar, plus they experience the Virtual Institute live, people will get the work and actually have the conversations and develop. And people can also be the facilitators or the trainers of this. And you get a second dip and you're like, I got the handouts. I've seen it now twice. I can go out and do it. So I hope to see you in those. So there's so many activities and approach to doing this work. How do you create inclusion in the workplace, in the classroom? But before you start trying some of these, you need to get very grounded in a few things. And one is, what does an inclusive team, an inclusive workplace, an inclusive classroom mean to you? And get very clear what it means. What's your vision? What's your intention? What are your outcomes? What do you want to have happen? What do you want to create and manifest? And I would encourage, since it's still mid-August, as you're bringing teachers back together, whether they're faculty in a college or teachers in PK-12, that you have that conversation with them. You still have a couple days, I think, of development. My niece has just started being a first-year teacher, and so she's doing all kinds of boot camp, that's what they call it. And then in the class, in her school, she'll do some in-classroom and then meet the teachers. So there's still time probably to plan, how do I do some of these with everybody, and then how do I do it in my individual classroom? And if you're a team leader, you may want to talk to other leaders, supervisors, because if you're not clear as an organization, get the whole organization to say, what is our vision? Then how do we roll that down to your individual team, your individual department? You've got to know where you're going and the direction you're going, or you'll just be like your team all over the place, frenetic action. And one way to know where you're going is to get very clear what's the organization's vision, values, mission, your strategic plan, and ground all your classroom development, all your team building, your team development within that. So you can say to your class, We're going to develop more inclusion because that's what we're about as a school. That's what we're about as a college. Here in our organization, we are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. And so in this team, we want to treat everyone with respect and have equity in here. It increases our productivity. So tie it to the larger. If not, people will just think it's just words you're saying. This is how we do progress. This is how we promote learning. And so you look at it now. How close are you to where you are? What the vision of the organization, of the classroom, the school, how close am I to helping create that in my own area? So it might be helpful to break it down. I love scales. If you've seen me before, it's kind of how I think. 0, not at all, to 10, completely. So how inclusive, productive is your current classroom? And if you're just starting one here in this new term, you can reflect back the one you just did maybe this summer or last spring, all last year. How inclusive was it? 0 to 10. And if you're in a team, how inclusive, productive was the team, the work climate, your productivity? Did it really generate? And then you can break it down into a bunch of these, and there's more. But you can think about, 0 to 10, how effectively did we value and respect differences, full breadth of differences? Support the learning and growth of everyone in the classroom and on our team, so we're all getting professional development. How effectively are we communicating, engaging, especially when there's low, medium, or high tension and conflict? And when there's disagreements and conflict, can we resolve them and make them more productive learning moments and help us all develop the capacity to engage effectively, respectfully when there's conflict? Now, teams particularly do planning and decision-making, but also in the classroom, you've got small groups. You might have project teams, you might have study groups, and they're planning. And so how are you teaching them how to make decisions and plan with an inclusion lens so they can collaborate and have good teamwork, whether we're doing customer service, projects, product development, whatever we're doing. Productivity and creativity is critical to learning. It's also critical in teams. And finally, you might think, 0 to 10, how effectively have I skilled everyone up and they, in the moment, recognize and interrupt microaggressions and other unproductive behaviors? And so some of the tools that we'll share today will help develop the capacity of all those folks to move along that continuum. But again, you got to look at their readiness. You have to look at how they have been, and what I'm offering are some generic ways to do it. You'll have to scale it given where they are and how much time you have. And teachers and faculty, again, you can look at the possible readiness by looking at your school, the students you've typically had, who you've had in former classes, and you may know who you already are having, and you may talk to the teachers before who had them. But again, they may not be committed to equity inclusion. Take everything you hear from folks with a grain of salt, particularly if they're trying to tell you about folks in marginalized groups and, they're a troublemaker and those sorts of things. Because we also know people that speak truth to power and have a marginalized identity, 2, 3, or 4, often get labeled and coded in ways that are out of implicit bias as opposed to meeting people where they are. So, grain of salt, but you can start to gather some information. So again, I'm going to start focusing on how do you create an inclusive classroom, then we'll do inclusive teams. And again, if you're in an organization, I still think there's things you can get out of this as we're looking forward. So first question is, how are you already intentionally creating an inclusive classroom? What are you always doing? And asking other teachers, asking other leaders and superintendents, have them come visit, your other principals, your deans, your department chairs, have that conversation so you're already sharing ideas before the semester starts. And you may want to reflect on very specific ways you're doing it. And so to look at your syllabus, your lesson plans, and what's already in them. So when, at least I'm assuming, I haven't done PK-12. I was trained to do it, but I never did it. But I'm assuming you either verbally or give out, here's what we're doing for the next month. Here's what and that you might even give out, whether it's on the chart, on a slide, you're giving it to the guardians, the parents. Here's what we're about. A statement of inclusion and diversity. This is what my classroom is about. For folks who are college, you can use the university's statement about non-discrimination and equity inclusion. You'll want a statement about universal design and creating an inclusive classroom and really learning about universal design more and how you can really help the learning of the full breadth of our learners, not just those that we call, quote, non-disabled. You want to get very clear and maybe put in writing your intentions for creating an inclusive classroom, why it's important to you, why it's critical to the content of your teaching and to their future, that we're about collaborative learning, respectful engagement. And so whatever is in writing, that syllabus is critical. It's the first thing many of the students will see. As they're coming into the PK-12 classroom, what you have up on the walls, what's on the bulletin boards will send the message of what you're about. And so intentionally, what are you putting forth? And if you have a website, discussion boards, what are all those and what messages you're sending? Now the course content, again, this is all before you start teaching. What are the authors they're reading? Now, too many people, again, this is my opinion, are having to use prescribed textbooks that are then published in only certain places that in the last, well, it seems recently, but I think for a long time, but I've seen in the research, have been pulling out and pulling out what I think is more accurate history and changing the descriptions of quote history. And so it's really getting rewritten and literally whitewashed. And so your supplemental materials so that people, whether they're learning chemistry and who are the key chemists, and if your chemistry book doesn't have a wide variety of folk across group identity, nationality, I'm just using that as an example. What does your textbook say? What books are you using? And how can you supplement it? Even if you've already decided, oh, we're using these books because the person used them before, how can I supplement it? Either get other people, the students, to bring in more information so that our authors truly reflect the full breadth and the students see themselves in the authors. They see themselves in the content of what you're reading. And if you're teaching something that might be more out of the arts and sciences and social sciences, are you having people read different perspectives, not just one perspective? So there's multiple perspectives. They're having to do critical thinking. Your stories, your examples, who you're bringing in as guest speakers, your videos. So again, it's not only the demographics visually, but the content you're bringing in. You can be very intentional now, and even if you've planned, you've still got some time by late September, October to add new things so that your assignments, you're having people get to know people different from themselves. If they're studying biology, they're meeting some of the more senior biology students, the people in graduate programs, and seeing if they can interview them. What are the careers? What are they? And having them interview someone different from themselves. So the ways you can build inclusion skills and concepts through the content and the assignments. If you're having people do an assignment, they're interviewing people, or a research paper, you can weave in the concepts we're teaching as well as the skills to be inclusive. It's not only that we say, let's all get along. And clearly I'm going to talk in a bit about how you can do your group project infrastructure, your study groups, how you can develop skills so that they don't turn into the horrific things that I experienced going on. So the pedagogy is critical as well. We're going to come back to how you greet yourself in a minute, but how you teach, if you're more experiential, engaging, and not this one-way teaching like I'm doing. But again, I don't know how else to do it in a webinar. If you're getting a space for multiple voices, small group work, and you're mixing up those groups so they really learn other people's experience, they get critical thinking, they get curiosity as they meet new people and understand different perspectives. So instead of lecture top down or this one way, if how you intentionally do it. And then again, instead of homogeneous self-selected study groups, project teams, we give them tools and we set them up for success and we check in progress. So take a deep breath. I could be wrong, but I know at college, whether it's online or in person, that first class, that second class are critical for creating the environment and setting the tone. And while if you're meeting with students in a PK-12 every day or every other day, you still, that first week, you're creating that container for learning. And so things to think about is literally how you greet folks. And I wonder if I would be today, if I'm face-to-face, I'd be at the door greeting people as they come in. And I'd make sure the classroom is set up so if folks are using wheelchairs, there's easy ways to get in. And I invite people to sit wherever you want because you'll be moving around pretty quick, and let them know I want you to be meeting new people. And as people are coming in, if they're waiting in line, I'm like, turn to the person behind you and say hello. So if you could start the connection right there and welcome as they enter. It just sets the tone. And how you introduce yourself, I'll be talking about that the next slide, is critical. About get them to know you, how you frame the course, how it's a part of their current learning and helps them in their future, and then the group development activity. So that's where we're headed. So when you're introducing yourself, as I do, just the name that you want people to call you and then what pronouns you use. And you may need to explain why you're having people use pronouns. I just met someone who has a friend who their 6-year-old has been sexed male at birth, and at 6 years old, she's like, My name is Lily, and I use she, her pronouns. And so if you're listening to this and you're doing PK-12 and you're wondering why we need to do pronouns, I just, as a school, I would be thinking about gender identity. Let's do some workshops on it and have people know about, I think just this last week, there was a school, I didn't read this example, but I saw the headline on Facebook that parents were threatening to violently attack, if not kill, a student who was transgender coming in. So the transphobia, the violence around all these issues of difference are there. And pronouns is just one of many ways you can set the tone to say this is a place where what pronouns you use, as well as how you pronounce your name and what name you use. And so all that is how you help set up the container. I would start, again, not like this is what we're going to do, but just to say, I'll cover the content here in a minute, but I want to talk about my passion for why I'm teaching sixth grade, why this is important for me to be teaching sociology. And I would tell some stories and let them get a sense of you on why it's critical. And it might be your own personal passion for the content you're teaching. It might be why that course helped you grow over the years. It may be how, as an adult, being in sixth grade was instrumental for you, or third grade, or whatever grade you're teaching. I haven't taught. I was high school, you can probably tell, prepared. So you gotta be age appropriate for everything I'm doing. But I bet you, even PK, you can say kindergarten was so important for me to get to know other people and to get to know myself and to learn these skills, to read and just to have fun and to learn that learning is fun. And so again, it doesn't have to be an hour, but just enough so they see you as more of a whole person with an energy you can bring in that you may not always bring in when you're teaching about a skill or content. The big why, what's your passion? Also want to talk about your vision and expectations for the kind of classroom that accelerates learning for all. I believe that if we all get to know each other and we really have respectful conversations, to disagree in ways where we talk about issues but not attack people, that's how we can all learn. Because to be honest, we're going to be reading a lot of things that we may not agree with. And I may say some things you may not agree with. So that's the conversation that we want to be having. That will lead into your role, that you'll be sharing information. You've set up the content, but you invite the students to bring in other content, suggest other learning, and that everybody is here to each one teach one. And so there'll be small group work learning, and that you're here to learn with people alongside. It's important. I don't know if you can see I'm putting one hand in front of the other. This is privileged, marginalized, and teachers are often way up here, especially younger students. And even as you get into undergrad, I'm finding that traditionally undergrad students are putting me on a pedestal when I show up and do workshops. And so I really try to lower. Now, I do know more and I organized it, but that doesn't mean I'm up here like teach and learn what I'm saying. I want it to be collaborative learning. So when you're introducing yourself, you can set that up. Now, if you're a manager, you might be listening and thinking, ooh, how do I want to set up that kind of collaborative each one teach one? I'm still the manager. But how do I do it so it's not I'm the manager, I say everything goes, but together we create a productive environment. You may want to do some personal stories. Again, what you were like before you took the course or before you were in this grade, and how it really impacted and set you up for success in future learning and set you for success in your career and in your life. Now, some of this may not work, but I know at college, trying to help students understand why this course that they're mandatory to take can help them in a wide variety of skills, can help them be a little more open and focused and take the course more seriously. And then you may want to share some of your personal experience and credentials. Now, notice I don't start with that. I think that's pretty dominant culture. But some folks, it'll be important to know credentials, especially if you have one or more marginalized identities, especially if they're more apparent, because of all of their biases will come in. So if you identify as, I was about to say white woman, but probably white woman is 80% of the teachers they've seen. But if you're a person of color, cross-gender identities, if you identify as trans, if you identify as someone from another country, if you identify as someone that doesn't speak English the way I do, but uses a quote accent that's not seen as smart, credentialing at some point may be useful. And then you want to share your hopes. Here's my intentions as your teacher, my role, and here's my hopes for you, and here's your role. So all of that. Now I want to note again around pronouns and name pronunciation. There are all kinds of ways to collect that up. It could be that you have a recorder and you ask each student to record their name and how they pronounce it and send it to you. Now, not everybody will, but those whose names often get mispronounced may do that. You may ask them if you use a bulletin board and discussion board to do that on there so that other students can click on and hear how they pronounce their name and see what name they want to use. If you use a bulletin board where people can put up a picture they want and then the name they want to use. So all these are ways, but how do you collect them in the classroom? You could send around the list you were given and say, if this is not the name you want us to use, please put in the name you want us to use. You can have name tags the first several days of class. And then ask people, they can actually phonetically put and write, how do you pronounce your name on your name tag if you want. And then the first 4 times people speak, everybody says, my name is Kathy, and they use their pronouns if they want. All that is possible. And to be honest, I think people should have name tags the entire time. Take a deep breath. So, in my opinion, before you actually get into reviewing the syllabus, I would do some group development. Now, your course may be, I got to get in the syllabus, and I'll do group development at the end of that 50-minute class. But I want to show you a few ways that in a class, I think, you got to do age appropriate, but I think you can use in most classes. So you can get people engaging each other and set the classroom context on the engagement skills. So here we go. I get people, go move around and meet 5 people till you hear a chime, and then find a high five buddy. And the intention of this is people might sit with people they know, and they're usually a pretty homogeneous groups they're sitting with, so they have to meet other people. And you may say hey, and kind of where you're from. And just like 10 seconds each, and then meet somebody else. And then a high five buddy, somebody they don't know very well. And the chance of this is they can have more in-depth conversations, multiple conversations over the semester, and somebody that they can get to know out of their kind of friendship group. You can do a whole bunch of things, but with that first one, I like to do name, what are the gender pronouns you use, why'd you take this class? Now, again, you have to adjust if you're PK-12, what do you hope to learn in this class, or what you're excited about this class? And then one, the type of learning classroom environment that's best for you. Just share some of that out. You can hear some of that out, but I've set this up that the pairs would then go meet with another group of pairs. And then they talk about a time they mattered and the specific dynamics that help them feel a part of a good learning community. And I bet even 6, 7-year-olds you can massage this. We could talk about a time you learned something and what helped you learn it. And so I could be wrong, but you start with the positive, and then you debrief. What helped you matter? What helped you learn? What did others do that had you feel respected? And when people feel that way, what's the impact on learning? And get them to start to say it. Ask for new voices all the time. Now they're in groups of 4. With this one, you would have had them mixed up with another person they haven't met with. So the 2 pairs, you get them mixed with a different pair. For the next slide, you get them mixed with that one person they've not talked with. They switch slides again. Now they're talking about a time it was a classroom, learning environment, and someone, they or someone else, felt disrespected, excluded. What happened? What was the impact of the learning? Did somebody speak up? What could have someone done? Can make it age appropriate, but have them have that conversation. Again, debrief. What did you feel when you were marginalized? What did people do that was not useful? What was the impact on learning? You can even say, what do you wish they would have done in that moment? So these 2 pairs get people meeting each other, particularly in your high school and college, building those relationships. And I think it works in, for sure, middle school as well. And you collect that up, and then you can say, so imagine if we were co-creating a learning environment to help everybody learn here, what would it look like? And you have people answer these questions. And again, it can be in their group of 4. What should no one ever have to experience in our class? What should everyone get to experience? What does everyone deserve so it helps their learning? They can talk for a minute and then brainstorm. You can chart and you can talk about the norms. Now, also on page 4, I have some ones that I use with traditionally college students and older. I haven't used these with high school and younger. But you can, again, look at these and maybe come up with a list that you think's useful in your classroom if you do PK-12 and offer it as a starting point, but always have them add to it. I think it's wrong in any classroom to say, here's how we're going to be. It's got to be co-created because it has to get in them and they have to own responsibility. So you're not policing the whole time. You can ask them to look at the list, which ones will help us have meaningful discussions, deep learning, skill development, have people feel valued. have them in maybe a new small group, which ones are easy for you, a stretch for you. So any of these, again, the intent is to meet new people, but also co-create a learning environment. I also want to talk about number 12, which is what do you do if you're triggered? And so you'll have to define what trigger is, that hot button, that unexpected wave of emotion. And you could give a couple examples of common triggers that could happen. And then you could discuss what would we do if someone does occasionally say something we're triggered. Now, again, this is early. You'll need to revisit this maybe every few weeks just to remind folk. Halfway through, check in, how are we doing? But at least introduce this concept of if you feel triggered, you can breathe. Let us know. Can we slow down and talk about this, Ms. or Mr. or I don't know how to pronounce MX, Doctor. If they're in a college classroom, they may have the permission quote to take a break, and they may want to, as they're writing, do some doodling. Again, K-12, I don't know what you want to recommend they do, but just kind of breathe and go inside and think about why they're triggered. And if they want to let you know, they can let you know at any point. Now, another way to create these learning guidelines is after they've done those warm-up activities, you can have them in small groups with a chart paper or on the bulletin boards and, what are they called? Chalkboards, there you go. Line down the middle, left side, ways we engage that will support our learning as a community, and ways to engage that crosses a line. And I don't define that. So you might even change the language which actually undermines learning or would have people not feel respected. You can change this language. But the content, the idea of small groups, brainstorming, 5 on each side, then they move to another one, and they see what their peers wrote, and then they move to another one, have them move 3 or 4 times. It energetically says, this is what we're about. And those 1 or 2 students, maybe 4 or 5 students that aren't usually the ones that will work within these kind of learning engagement ideas, they see that the whole class is about it. So if you're a manager or leader, you're seeing how you can apply this to your organization, can't you? Same thing. You're really asking people to say, before you speak, ask the question, am I speaking, am I about to speak, and act as the person I want to be, to help everybody's learning and help my own learning. I want to spend a little time talking about how do you get the groups prepared to do project teamwork and study groups. Now, I hated these. There were just horrible group dynamics, often based on exclusion, based on privilege marginalized, and an incredible uneven workload. And I just, even in my doctoral work, I hated doing them. So we need to intentionally teach students, whatever age and skills they are, these life and career skills, leadership skills, learning skills. So first, clarify expectations that we're going to have effective conversations, effective meetings. We want to teach them how to observe group dynamics, to interrupt ineffective dynamics. And you want to be assigning roles that rotate. A facilitator each time, a process observer to watch the dynamics, to maybe get them back in line. Not, I mean in line, but if someone got interrupted and talked over to say, oh, wait a minute, Julie, you weren't finished. And Jose, you were trying to get in. What did you want to say? So some of that, now the facilitator can do it, but to have 2 people watching is good. And then a note taker, and make sure you rotate them across gender identity, across race, across class of origin, so everybody's doing it and you don't just stick 1 or 2 people doing it. So here's some quick activities and get people doing it. You can ask, do all members of your study group and project team feel like they belong or included, and how would you know? And so if you turn to page 11, you could teach the skill of panning to help them think about they have to notice dynamics, notice the facts of what's going on around them without judging, and just notice the patterns. But you can also just jump right into, it's not page 4, it's actually page 12. And if you look on page 12, these are about 20 things to watch for. Who's speaking, how long, who's quiet, who gets interrupted, what ideas get listened to, which plop. And so you can have all your students, and I'll bet this might be written at a maybe middle school level, but you can take it and take out any other jargon words, and maybe 20 is too long, you make it 10. And just teach people what to watch for when they're in small groups, and a few ideas about how to invite people in. Now, the other thing you can do is remind them it's about all group memberships. Now, this is what I use when I'm in college. You may want to shift this if you're in PK-12, and again, this is a lot of words, but you may want to get it to maybe the 10 that are most up for your classroom. But most classroom teachers, English proficiency is definitely nationality, immigration status these days, in addition to class, disability status, economic. So appearance is big. So I have trouble shortening them. Now, if you go on to pages 14 to 16, it can be really powerful. Now, this could be the whole class you can do this with, of what are the unproductive behaviors, whether the meeting behaviors or classroom behaviors, that get in the way of our project and study teams, but get in the way of our classrooms. And this can help raise awareness of the dynamics. And so I have people look at one of the pages, one maybe do page 14 and maybe half the room, and then the other half do 15, and there's a little more in 16. Check off the ones that look familiar and think, what's the impact if these happen? And then they got to move and find somebody you haven't talked to yet. And this might be your second or third class, by the way, or the class when you're setting up study groups. And share, what are your reactions to looking at these examples, negative impact if they happen, cumulative impact if they happen over and over to the same people, and how can we engage each other if occasionally somebody does these. So these are actually triggering moments for many people. And so it ties back into that concept. Again, if you reinforce these skills over and over. But take a deep breath. Again, you got to edit to make it age appropriate and what's going to work. But then you might share some tools, because these tools may work for some on pages 19 and 20. These work for sure, college, traditional college age and above. I think they'll work for high school. These are just some of the skills that I teach. I teach faculty this. I teach college administrators, people in organizations. So again, half the room, read page 19, half 20. Which tools do you already use, and which ones could you use to start a conversation if there's a triggering moment, if there's a misunderstanding, if there's a conflict, and you have people then talk about those and share. We're trying to get folks in the classroom and in these study groups who are brave enough to start a conversation that matters. Now, last thing or so with us here in the classroom, these are just ways to increase participation in general, to get people out of their people they know, out of their identity they hang with, and build relationships. So whether it's you give the reflections ahead of time or as homework so they come in ready to have conversations. Before you do large group conversations, you do some quick icebreakers to get people warmed up, even if it's a 2-minute something. Pairs like I've been doing, suggesting talk with one other person, first reflect, then talk before you do large group. You need to be scanning the room to make sure a lot of voices get in. You can invite stories. So if people are making a strong opinion, you say, can you tell me a story about that? And just continue to move people around so that they're getting to know people. And this is for everybody. This is someone said at their faculty meeting, everyone gets 3 pennies. And this will work in a classroom maybe. And you only get to talk 3 times. And so this is a way for folks that are always talking, they can only talk 3 times. So they might have to reflect a bit more when they want to talk. You could have, after student talks, they invite the next student in and bring in someone that hasn't been in so that they're helping having all voices in. And then end of class journal where people can respond, what's been useful, what didn't you say, what else would you like to increase participation, inclusion, thoughts for me as a professor, as the teacher. They can put a symbol on that so that you don't know what name it is. But even if you prep all these different group development, all this way to start an inclusive classroom and inclusive team, there are still going to be difficult situations. And so you can prep, again, translate this if you're working in an organization. But you can have them talk about a time in the classroom there's a conflict that resolved effectively. What helped? Time in a classroom, difficult situation was not resolved effectively. What did people do that was not helpful? What could have been useful? Again, this may feel repetitious, but halfway through when there's conflict around October, you may want to revisit this, spend 10 minutes at the beginning of a class, revisit your norms. Now, when there's conflict, a couple things that you can do to structure it. Asking someone to tell a story. If they say, I believe this, well, tell me a story about why you believe that so strongly. An example from your life or something else. Gets them out of their head into practical. And then they're like, well, because it may just be what they're repeating from what they saw on a news channel. Having people paraphrase back what they heard before they get into a debate and say, so I hear you saying this, here's the impact, or here's where I agree, I'm still wondering about this, I'm still curious about this, so you want to promote dialogue. And all of that maybe before, and then they say, and this is maybe where I disagree. So these are, again, more advanced skills of dialogue. College, maybe high school will be teaching this and modeling it. To get them to think more complexly, you can say, who haven't we heard from, especially if it's a different perspective, and get more people in so that you're not the one challenging the person whose perspective you may disagree with. You're getting other people to engage because it's not necessarily a right, wrong. It's multiple perspectives. It's critical thinking we're teaching. And then you can put them into some reflection papers. write what you believe, and then given what you believe, why might people be concerned or have different opinions? So they have to see the other side. Or a writing assignment, take on a perspective that's not your own and what could be useful about this, and go find research that might support that. They may not find any, but again, they have to get that multiple perspective taking. All of this can help people maybe move to get the skills they need to be effective lifelong learners. I take a deep breath. So much of what I did, you can translate to teams, but I want to show a few more things, especially what you can do in mini retreats. How do you create an inclusive team from the start? So again, I'd get them moving around, meet people, high five buddy, the same thing. You would change it a little bit, maybe. I would do what's up, how you feeling today, how was your summer, and what's weighing on your heart and mind. Things that are going good, maybe one or two things that are weighing on your heart and mind. That'll get people connecting as human beings before we get to work. And then I would start with the progress. What's some changes, actions you've done in your area, or how you're working to create greater inclusion, better to serve students? Again, clients. So they're getting them thinking about what we've been doing to meet those goals of inclusion, customer service, full breadth of students. And again, customers, you may be in a nonprofit, so your clients, whatever you call it. I want you to celebrate progress, to be able to have them look at what are we doing that's going really well. So reflect back, last few months, 6 to 12, individually, what have you done to help achieve goals? And collectively, again, get them out of that individual only me, but collectively. Then have them imagine, what would it look like if we were an inclusive, highly collegial, productive team? So you could talk about it, but I love doing right brain stuff. So you could just have a whole bunch of newsprint on the wall and everybody gets some markers. They go up and draw a symbol, a picture, or they can use a few words. And then have people move back and look at the whole thing. Now, if you've got a lot of people, you can have them at a table with one chart pad and paper and they're writing. So there's 5 or 6, 8 people doing it. But then have them look back and look, what do you see in each other's? And just kind of talk about that. And then have the people that actually offered it add in anything else they meant to have in it. So this is just some quick team building that gets people out of the day-to-day work and remind them why we're doing it. Plus they're getting to reconnect with each other and why are we here? I think it's also important to have people look at passion. How do you are committed? Why are you so passionate about creating inclusive organizations that accelerate all of our success, our team, full range of employees and our team? But also we're creating inclusive practices, programs, and services for everybody, full breadth that we're serving. Why is that important to you? And get in touch with their passion. So it's not like, I have to do it, but they get to share that. And again, mix them up. I might have them in groups of 4. So that new people, so that people they don't usually work with, or maybe they work with, they don't get along with, but they're having to talk more personally. They can then revisit the working agreements, use all those strategies we just did, pull out the ones, if you've already got some, they can set some new ones, but it's how do we minimize? And so the same activity, but the question is different. Work environment where you mattered, what were the group dynamics that help you matter, right? Same question, you're just shifting it, making it you. Work environment, you felt disrespected or someone was mistreated. It interrupted productivity. What happened? Did anybody intervene? What did you wish would happen? Different pairs, debrief them each time. And then I think critical teams have to do principles engagement. You're a long-term connection. So have them behaviors that foster inclusion, teamwork, productivity, that cross a line, and then talk about them. You can share the list from page 4 as a starting place, but really have them negotiate and co-create them. Now, again, on my website /events, you can get all the past webinars around microaggressions, the activities about to highlight. I'm not going to teach you how to do it. We will probably maybe do them in the virtual institute, but you can go back to June and July, and a lot of these activities are there, and I teach you how to do it. So I encourage you. Getting people to realize they're not only individuals, they're a member of a team with multiple group memberships in a climate and culture that may not always help us be productive, and that we're always trying to improve. And the who are you activity from sustained dialogue. Teach them individual level, who are you? One-on-one, they get to share that. And the same person do the group level. Now the group identity cards are in the back of this packet, pages 73 on, and so you can make them for them. Or you can just put up a slide that has a whole bunch of different group identities like this so they can get out of the ones you usually think about. And they're sharing just what are their group memberships. And they're who are you, and they're sharing them. But then what's your story? This is critical with teams. And if you're in a school, it'd be critical with teachers to do it, maybe with the principals, assistant principals. talking about growing up. What are 4 to 6 identities that really influence your shape and shape your growing up, that helped you be who you were? And have them talk about those. Now, to be honest, I'd have them do one now and then 1 in 2 weeks, one another week. Now, maybe they do it on their own time, but if you have regular staff meetings, I would build it in so that over the maybe 3-month quarter, you have them talk to most everybody. And whether it's this question or some of the others I'm going to offer, structured ways using group membership to get them to know each other beyond the surfacey stuff. Again, you come back to individual, and then you can do the playing card activity. Go look at that webinar from, I think I did at the end of June. And I referenced it in the end of July, and all the handouts are there. In the packet, I have pages 28 on the 101 training guide, real descriptions of how to do this activity, the playing card activity. This gets them thinking about inclusion and exclusion dynamics. It's quick 2 minutes, a 5-minute debrief, but it's a great warm-up that after they all get a playing card, ace to 2, high, medium, low card, then what do you think you have? How are you treated? How does this feel familiar to team, organizational dynamics, societal dynamics? Now, some of these you may want to do in a mini retreat, but I want to show you some things that you could do to start the year off right. They get to talk about who gets treated, high, middle, low cards. If you have time, when have they been treated like a low card, medium, a high card? These are the conversations that can build those relationships. So when there's conflict, I'm not arguing with someone I don't like. It's like, oh, I'm not happy in the moment, but I know you. It's a different conversation. Relationship building is key. I love this one. What playing card activity generally is how you're treated in different meetings, casually if nobody knows you, when you're on the virtual, and let them tell in society in different, so let them tell stories in like 5 or 6 different, and have the group identity cards in front of them. It can be powerful building relationships. Again, you can do this in groups of 4. If you're a team of 8, I might do it as a team. It's just powerful team building, but you're teaching inclusion, you're reinforcing it, and you're teaching privileged, marginalized concepts, and you're building relationships. Take those same group identity cards, and people can write a list. What groups are more on your screen, which ones you have to think about to really keep them centered in your work. And that'll tell you what professional development you need to be doing with folk. But again, this is a great way for people to realize, oh, I'm pretty good on these issues, but our clients have a wide variety. I need to build services and products to better meet the needs. This is all warm up to do a revisioning of what your goals are. Now, again, a lot of these you may do in mini retreats, but I want to encourage you to be doing social activities. Once a month. Now, not requiring them, but highly encouraging. Make sure they're different kinds. When I used to consult a lot to financial institutions, the social activities were golfing and wine tasting. I don't do either. And so asking people what are the activities they like to do, not the loudest voice wins a majority, but they, write down and fold them up and then read them all in the room. And they're like, So a lot of things we could do together. Optional, but see if you can't do them. And you may want to make sure you're helping to pay for stuff so that if somebody resources isn't the way that keeps them from coming. You might have people in the team organize it themselves so they share in it. But I really want to encourage you thinking about a mini fall retreat where you keep doing inclusion. It could be like I'm offering, which is focus on group memberships, societal group memberships, but it could be using the DISC, Myers-Briggs, those work style things, conflict styles, more socialization, strengths, whatever it is to get people to know each other in different ways. But I wouldn't only do those. I believe you have to do the group identities work that we've been talking about. Now, if you're teachers, if you're faculty, some of that mid-semester work can be attending a workshop together, attending a program together, and then having coffee afterwards to talk about. That's if you're college. For PK-12, the field trips can be a great time, or taking a half of your class, the last 20 minutes, for fun, and you bring in food, and you have them do some getting to know you activities, but something to release some of that mid-semester stress, get people to know each other. So a few more things to do mid-semester, mid-year in teamwork. And again, you can bring this in the classroom, but it's really more for teams. And if you're in a school, this could be what you do in your January, all faculty, all teachers come together. Triggered. Get them to know some of their own triggers, what their warning signs are, and then on pages 22 to 24, common triggers. And the definition of trigger and my cycle is on page 21. They can go through that list, your common triggers, get in some small groups, and each person kind of shares one. If you don't have the handout, they can just reflect when you're in a team meeting or you're working with clients, what are some hot buttons, things that get under your skin? No names. They can write a list of 5, and then they're in a small group and they each share one, and people say, oh yeah, me too. And they just relate in. And then when these occur, what could we do to support each other? And if they happen in our team, what could we do if these are happening? But continue to build connections and relationships. If you're in K-12, I would do this with your school. And especially, I think my niece is working with 3 or 4 people, and they're sharing, I think, the 5th grade or 6th grade. I think it's 5th grade. So that group coming together and spending time knowing when they're triggered and how they can support each other, and when I'm the one that's causing the trigger. So that's critical if you have a team you work with. You can talk about the 4 F's. When you are feeling that hot button, how do you tend to react? And so that way, if you do that, I won't take it personally. It's like, that's your style. So that's another whole level of conversation. And then you can teach some skills how to de-escalate the emotions. I'm not saying stuff. I am talking about bring them down so you can think clearly, choose how you want to respond. That could be a full day training, could be 2 half days. You can do it quickly in 3 hours, but the results you'll get will be less. But teach everybody these tools and skills. And to be honest, you can teach these skills in your classroom. And I would encourage you to do it, especially if you have project teams. When they're triggered on project teams, study groups, what they can do. The last major thing I want to do with teams is you have to have people refresh their goals. And so I love this one. If you chase 2 rabbits, you will not catch either one. Russian proverb. So you need to revisit, reassess your team goals. I think this can work in the classroom mid-time to say, what are our goals? We got to refocus. But what's our progress? How close are we? Celebrate it, but also how far we need to go. And so I would give team members these kind of questions before. A lot of your folks are going to be reflective learners, introverts. And so give them a week to think about, what are we proud of, our successes, again, individually, the team, and our partners. Help them think that it's not just us. Who are we working with? How effectively are we aligning our efforts? What's working, what's not so working? Because we're beginning to get both and. What's working, what's not so working. And so what are some practices? What are some team dynamics? Ask, what am I doing that's helping, not helping? What do you want me doing differently? What are we doing that's useful, but what's getting in our way? And you can just ask these questions, but you also may want an outside facilitator to come in and help facilitate that so you're a member of the group. You want people reflecting on a whole bunch of areas, but these are just some. Productivity, customer service, efficiency. You can look at the list. How innovative are we? How well are we making decisions? If you remember those 0 to 10 continuums from the beginning of this workshop, you could have continuums, get people move. How effective are we? And have them move, and what are we doing well, what not? Engage with someone near you, talk large group, what could we do differently? There are all kinds of ways to do it to get more voices in. Be making sure you're watching by group membership whose voices are in, because mostly it's people in their privileged identities that get in. So communication, how we're doing with disagreements, renegotiating those norms. Any of that can be a great way to reset. You also get to reset by what's our destination and how will we know if we get there. So pull out your norms, pull out your goals, group goals, individual goals, organizational strategic plan, how close are we? But also ask, how will we know when we get there? So they get specific in behaviors and accomplishments. And just revisit. Now, to be truthful, the part about revising your goals is probably a whole mini retreat in itself, where they can identify overlapping responsibilities, where there's gaps in accountability, barriers to success, activities. I know you may want to hear this. I didn't when I was a manager. I just kept adding things on, but activities that no longer serve us, that aren't aligned, or that are more, they're getting us 50%, but if we reshift, we'll get 80%, and it's a better use of time, energy, resources, and it decreases burnout, because most times people are doing less with more and they're exhausted. And so realigning and maybe even sharpening up, tightening up, how is our work working to our goals? Is there anything that's taking us off mission? Is anything outdated? Is no longer working for us? And let those off the to-do list. Now, I can say that, but I wasn't very good at doing it. But in my personal life, as a trainer, consultant, executive coach, whatever you call what I'm doing right now, I am definitely doing that. I'm asking more, how is this helping me manifest my big why? Is this aligned with where I want to go? in my vision in my business? Is this bringing me joy? Is this the best use of my talent, what I know and what the universe has me? So I am shifting how I'm doing it. So I am getting back on mission a little closer. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, Stephen Covey, but to schedule your priorities, helping other people know that. FaceTime just came to me. Too often in organizations, we value FaceTime as opposed to quality of work, quality of relationships, productivity. And so it's a whole nother part of the conversation. You can do anything, but not everything, David Allen. Again, I hate this one, but it's true. What are our priorities? What's our vision? How do we want to get there collectively with inclusion and making choices and just coming back and asking, how close are we? Getting your team to know, and this is true in the classroom as well, we're always under construction. Progress, not perfection, but it's continuous improvement. And that's what we're about, individually and a team. And you check in at least every 3 months, mini retreats 2 to 3 times a year. And then I think the beginning of every September, August, when people are back from vacation, it's just a natural way people are thinking it's beginning of the year, even if the fiscal year started at a different time. So with all my webinars, take what you like, leave the rest. But having our team members know you're always open to new ideas, innovative ideas, concerns, frustrations, feedback from me as leader, and that you can talk to me individually, you can talk to me in team meetings, you can say, I think we need a retreat, and say, while I'm the leader, we are a team, and we're all responsible for having us all be effective and moving forward. We're always under construction, and share that leadership as much as you can. Whether it's a team retreat, whether it's actually a team meeting, and for teachers, faculty, you may want to do this 3 times, once a month at least. This is written for teams, but so what I'm appreciating about us as a team and what our experience is, what I'm learning from each other, what I'm learning today, what I intend to do differently to help our team be effective, create greater inclusion in our program services. If I extrovert what it'd be like in a classroom, what I'm appreciating about how we're learning together, what I appreciate about the curricula, the content, as well as the pedagogy, how you're teaching, and what I'm learning. And people can draw. I just went to younger kids. They might draw what they're learning or what they're liking. They could write some words and share that. Again, you can tell I don't teach much younger than 18-year-olds. But the idea of having constant feedback one-on-one, as well as the class saying what they're liking about it and if they like something different. When I was trained to be a teacher, I'm not sure I ever would have thought to do that. But if I had asked those 10th graders that I was teaching history, well, I was trying to teach, I don't know if I was any good. If I said, so how am I doing? And just write down on a piece of paper, is there any other way I could be teaching and supporting your learning? There'd be a small number that might use it as a way to just kind of be funny or take a pot shot. But I'll bet a lot of folk would take it seriously. And I'm modeling inclusion in the process, and I value students' voices. It's not adultism, but we together are learning together. Take a deep breath. I want to say just a little bit about onboarding, because not only are you bringing in new people, your school might be bringing in new teachers. And so if you are one of those new teachers and you don't have a transition team, you may want to ask for one. If you are a new employee or a new manager, you may ask for one. That can be people not only from your area, but also from the organization, the school, who meet with you to help you answer your questions, maybe help you moved in, meet with you over 6 and 12 months so that they're helping you meet other people. Maybe they say, oh, you should go meet this person. I want you to go have coffee with them or take a break with them. But they're checking in with you. You've got thousands of questions. So not only your supervisor, but it's another group you can go to answer your questions. They teach you the unwritten rules that aren't written down. Like, this is how things work. Now, be intentional who the transition team is, that you want them a part of the new culture, not the old stuck culture, but the new inclusive culture. So be inclusive, intentional inclusive on who you change. And make sure you're meeting as a supervisor with your individuals. And if you are a faculty or a supervisor of your new teachers, you're meeting with them either individually or as a group. You can do this coaching, mentoring as a group. And on page 27 to 29 is information about the inclusion way to do onboarding. It's not complete, but it's some interesting ideas that I collected from different places and then added some. And finally, as you're doing onboarding, ask them how they're doing with self-care and community care, meaning the team, community care, as well as the organization, the whole school. And they might say, I'm so excited. And you're like, great. And let's stay talking, because as goes on, I want to support you thinking about your self-care, the care of your classroom, the care of the team, as well as us as a whole faculty, us as a whole organization. It's critical. On pages 25, 26 are just some beginning ideas about that. Now, November and December, my webinars, all these free webinars, that'll be all on self-care and lots of strategies that you can use. It's, I think, pretty good timing that people might need them. But you can start with being clear. We want you to have balanced, effective life so you can be very useful and productive in the classroom and the team. And I want to support you doing that. And so come to me anytime and we can have a conversation about how to look at self-care, community care. I want to reference you to pages 5 to 10. You may have seen these before. These are tools and skills that I think all leaders need, all teachers need, and we can be training to in our college classrooms, even in maybe middle high school, maybe even younger. These are capacities. Now, they are written for folk in organizations, whether they're college or other kinds of organizations. So you can adjust them, but I really want you to reflect on yourself. Where are you? Your demonstrated current capacity, and how do you want your team? And you could have your whole team take it and collect up strengths as well as areas they want to learn, and you could have a whole year of professional development right there. But this could guide you if you're a faculty developer, if you're supervised teachers. What are the skills in the classroom? Now, rewrite this, because these are written for more formal organizations outside of K-12. But it may give you some ideas to what do teachers need to do to help create inclusion, the skills we've been talking about. And to be honest, you might take this and come up with 10 that you want all students in your class to have. And you're developing those life skills while you're also doing the content you're teaching. Deep breath. If you do what you've always done, you'll keep getting the same results. If you want something new you've never had, you got to do something different. I'm not saying all the things I'm doing will work for you particularly, but I do believe there might be a few that you may want to try. You don't have to have it all figured out. Try a few things in a month, and keep a few things in your back pocket. I do believe that some of these things may seem insignificant, and yet, in the scaffold way I'm offering, can make a significant difference in your classroom and in your teams. Radical difference. I want to remind you of some of the other free resources. On the front of your packet, you've got the 3 books that I've written these last couple of years. These could be book clubs among teachers, faculty, and among your whole team. Turn the Tide. Again, that's difficult situations, September, October. But I'm Not Racist, the first webinar from February about creating inclusion, particularly around race and dismantling institutional racism and internalized racism in us, especially in our dominant whiteness. And then self-care, a whole book on it. And so just other resources folks may need now, or you can have throughout the year. The webinars, you can have your team, other teachers. If you sign up for them, you get the recording, so you don't have to necessarily come. And so you can use them as professional development as they're useful. The Virtual Institute coming up, I think, can be very useful if you have a training or a development role, as well as bring people together, and you'll just have a live workshop with me. Love to see you back in September or October for the institutes and the webinars. And then finally, if you find you want to have deeper long-term learning with me, people are still joining my masterclass for inclusion practitioners. It's a virtual live class that you get recordings of. And so if you can't attend everyone, just really deepen your capacity. All those 64 skills we focus on over 12 weeks. There are people that work with me in a year-long program who really want to learn what I know, do what I do. Internal change agents, transformational change leaders, as well as external change agents. And then finally, I work long-term with organizations to do intense professional development. It's very exciting. So we have a full 5 minutes. That's more than before. Let's open it up to some questions, and you can pop into the chat. Catherine has also been putting in a lot of those other web links if you just want to pop in and grab them. If you didn't get them because I was moving too fast. So what? Oh, hey, Helen. Good to see you from Duluth. Hello. Anybody have any questions, dilemmas? What do you do ifs? Catherine, did any come in earlier?
We do have a couple in here. We have one that's a reaction. Back when you noted, I don't know how else to do this on a webinar, we did get Travis sort of sent you some support on that one. He liked that you were being honest. So.
Yeah, and if people ever want to email me about how to be more engaging on a webinar, please let me know.
But we have two other actual questions in here. So the first one, in working with faculty from sciences and engineering on these issues, the most common resistance comes from the belief that their disciplines are completely objective, unconcerned with social identities and political correctness, quote unquote, open to all who work hard, etc. Do you have suggestions on how to transform those classrooms into more inclusive spaces?
So when I do train the trainer, it's like, how ready are the folks to hear? And if your faculty are kind of not very ready or open, that's kind of down by 0, 1, or 2, you may just offer and say the learning guidelines, having people who are lab partners, study group, and start there. How do you set up the study group, some of those skills? And that might be stretch enough for folks. If you frame it as these are the skills engineers need now, and in the future, as the world is shrinking and we're really working globally much more, the skills to work effectively with people different from themselves, to recognize bias, to interrupt it, the microaggressions. If you can collect up literally from the students, you can get maybe your student affairs folks in your School of Engineering, your School of Sciences to help collect up from students. There'll be student groups. Society of Hispanic Engineers. I wish it was Latinx, but that's what they call it. Okay, or women engineers or Black engineers, right? Get them to write generic examples. I call it the gallery activity. You can see it in June, July probably. Examples of microaggressions that happen in the classroom that underline learning. So if you can collect up 40 or 50 of those, now I just said race, but make sure you do breadth of differences. English as a first language, international students, immigration status, disability status, class. Collect them up and then do some faculty development where faculty read these and go, students from our STEM area said this is what happens in our classroom. So what would you do as faculty? So you may enter difficult conversations as well as interrupting microaggressions that interrupt learning, that students aren't learning what you're teaching, so they're not going to be successful, so that they're not going to get hired, so that lowers our standing with our competitors, right? We won't have as many grants coming in because we can't show that we're, people are going out and getting jobs. And the other thought is, Tuskegee and the gonorrhea experiments and just how science has been used to terrorize and traumatize. They can go to Nazi Germany, right? And so how some scientists with bias and believing they were justified. So you can tell I'm impacted nationally these days. But I think we can look at science and say science has been misused, so we have to have ethics. So come out from ethics. The other idea might be have them come in and write down 10 scientists that they know. And then say, and who are they by race and gender identity and disability? And you'll get people do what? And say, the scientists that I was taught mostly were white, heterosexual, cisgender men. And I've had to work hard to realize that there are scientists, and then have a PowerPoint. Who are these people? And just go through like 20 and have all kind of different group identities. Say, we're going to be studying, and some of your work is going to be learning, because we need to learn from the full breadth of our scientists and not just those that I was taught growing up. So let me stop there, because there might be a few other questions. But to intentionally have in your readings scientists of a full breadth of differences, microaggressions, and then think about, if they're going to be in a medical lab, they're going to have to work with people different from themselves and engage people with many different languages. And how do you prepare students to do it? Those are my best thinking.
All right, so you got some feedback.
I have one more. Get the research that shows how classrooms around science are differentially privileging white heterosexual US folk, I think. I don't know about the US, but I'm thinking English speakers, and how women across all races and men of color particularly US born, I would think African American, Latino, particularly, Native American, particularly, do not succeed at the same rates. And it's not about intelligence and competence. Now, if faculty practice say, if you just get us better students, then it's about their capacity to dismantle their own internalized racist ideas. But that's a whole nother workshop. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. So you did get a comment, great answer for the science and tech engineering folks. Love the gallery, so powerful. I have used it for years. Bravo, thanks, thanks, thanks. All right, then we have a question. Each one teach one, quote unquote, great approach, but how to avoid racial battle fatigue for students of color so they don't have to, once again, teach their white peers about being a URM, same for any other minority identity, question mark.
Yep, underrepresented minorities. So great wonder. So I have the conversation in general, so you could have them each one teach one. They do a readings, everybody comes in with a question they want to ask the group off the readings. And so they're leading the discussion a little bit. And then everybody's telling stories. And so you're scanning the room to make sure, in this case, it's not just folks of color telling stories. If, say, you're in a psychology class or you're in 12th grade and you're learning about urban, right, something. And folks are just saying, well, there's just people of color that live in urban and they turn the only Latina in the room or whatever. And so you're watching the dynamics, plus you're watching who's sharing. I would get clear that our intent is not that we learn only from the stories of the folks that have those life experiences, but your homework is, so in this case, if you're white, I want you going out and either through watching a movie, reading another article, or asking some other white folks, what are some examples of redlining? So if you're talking about redlining in 11th grade, go find out about redlining. Get on in Google. And so everybody has to do that, and you're not just having some folks who, by zip code, which is often impacting people of color, and some white folks by class. So I don't know if that wasn't my clearest answer, but challenging people to, everybody has to come in, and maybe they have to write a paragraph about it and turn it in, and then you have a discussion. But you're grading them that they've gone out and done research so that they're not actually depending upon. And then I'd interrupt it. You say, what I'm noticing is this is the third person of color to share great stories, appreciate it. And my concern is that we may be contributing to learning only from the people in the marginalized identity. So folks identify as white, reactions to what you're hearing, impact of what you're hearing, and other stories you have to add to our learning. So it's some of those facilitating training tools you can bring into the classroom.
All right, so the next one we have, I have a classroom full of mostly white students this fall. Any specific strategies? And to note, these students would be a mix of socioeconomic status, but mostly homogeneous race. If you don't mind popping in what grade you're talking, I'll get better. But I'll start kind of, or what the topic is. Freshman and first year college. And what are you teaching? Business students. Thank you. You anticipated me. So I might start, but I have in one of those early conversations, why is it critical that as business students, we have to learn about equity and inclusion and create inclusive organizations? And have them either write a paragraph on it, fold it up, trade it 5 times, and then read like 10 aloud in the group. And then you're like, yep. And then share some research. So you could have some of your homework to be some of the stuff out of Harvard Business Review or whatever you're using about why equity inclusion is critical to organizational success. So get them the business case first. Because my generalization and stereotype might be that they're not thinking about these issues. They're thinking about money, paying off their bills, paying off their student loans, taking care of their family and their community, those sorts of things. And so have them realize that most businesses and corporations cannot survive today. And then I might gather some of maybe a list, it's got to be out there, a list of all the corporations that have invested in intensive diversity training for all their employees.
I got to consult with First Union and Wachovia Bank that's now part of Wells Fargo. I'm not going to go into other things that are happening at that bank, but IBM, Apple. And if you get ones that recruit at your school, and just have a list. These, or pull up 5 of your biggest employers that come to your campus that hire from your business school, and get their equity inclusion statement. Print it out or put it on, your bulletin board, whatever they're called, Blackboard, right? And have students read them and then come in and talk about it. So those are a couple things. Business case. I might do the card activity, not the playing card activity you could do with business students would be great. And you can talk about what are some of the dynamics in the places you've worked that have undermined your success in business. And what are the concepts and comments, behaviors. And then you can introduce, and have you noticed who gets interrupted in meetings? So you can give them that sheet. Who gets talked over? Whose ideas don't get listened to? And just say, in many corporations, we still have this dynamic that if you're in privileged groups, and name some of them, senior level, white, male, vice presidents, you get heard and listened to. White women who are cisgender up there, but you have an out gay lesbian, out gay man, lesbian woman, may not get seen. You add race to that. They're a black queer person, right? You're like, they have to work harder to credibility. You have someone that uses a wheelchair, someone that's using a cane with some visual impairment. They're not as seen in the same way. And so you just start introducing this. Now, I would do it with an activity maybe, but those concepts tie everything back to business, everything back to success. And I would just drop this in and say, in my experience, and the research shows, you probably want to have a couple articles that say that people that are getting hired and promoted in businesses have these capabilities, and just list the 10 capabilities. There's got to be research that has creating inclusion, serving increasingly diverse client base, and creating an environment where people can thrive, effective supervision. There's got to be a place that says these are some of the 10 skills and capacities that people want to hire towards and get promoted towards. So I'm not saying your business students won't do it because it's the right thing to do or it's because of their heart, but I would lean towards business case, get yourself hired, get yourself promoted. This is the future. That's what I would suggest. And especially if you're teaching management. Now, if it's accounting and those sorts of things, there's not maybe as much room, but they've got to develop relationships with the people that are in accounting. If they're going to be working individually as an accountant, they have to. So those group identity cards, who are you and who might your clients be? And so it's an intro to business. So you might have plenty of room to just kind of dabble in some of these. And even if they want to do business behind the scenes, so they're not working with customers, they have to be able to work effectively on teams. And maybe you can get some research from your top, again, 10 employers on what are the demographics of their employees. And what are the demographics of who they're serving and the emerging markets they want to serve more effectively. You get that data. Now, to be honest, work with career services, because if they're not asking those questions of their employers, and if they're not giving good answers, like we have inclusive teams, we teach this, we have clear statements, and we have harassment policies, and we hold people accountable. If they can't meet those criteria, part of me says they should not be allowed to recruit on your campus. However, so many people coming to college these days are all about career, so you may not want to be cutting back on who's coming. But I would be very clear that this is your expectations, that if we're going to be sending our people to work for you, here's our expectations. So you get them to tell you what they're doing well. You share that with Intro to Business. You share that with all the other business faculty. Say, here's what I'm teaching, so that they're like, oh, that's really good. I'm going to add it too. You might get some of your faculty doing it more. All right, Catherine, were there any others?
All right, there is one last question here. It's actually sort of in a piggybacks on another one we had. This person says they will try the Each One Teach One approach toward international college students and hope to share the outcomes with you. And then asked if you have any recommendations, any recommendation to assessment tools.
You found my incompetence, one of the many. I don't. Anybody still on? Want to pop in the chat? And if the person who asked, if you could ask what kind of assessment tool.
One person says Clifton Strengths.
Yeah, so all those strengths would be similar to my inclusion practitioner assessment. It's different, but it's helping people, it's business students. What are your current skills? Here are the ones you need to have. If you're asking about assessment of how inclusive is the organization, so Clifton does get to some categories of difference like we're talking. You stumped me. You may want to talk to your faculty developers and your teacher developers to see what kind of, if it's assessments of teaching skills. If it's management, you can go to HR and see what they've got. It may not, no, they may not have stuff. I need to know more. I'm sorry about that one. Somebody did ask what was the second card activity. The group identity cards are in the back of your packet. I think it's 72 on. And there's about 2 pages of how to use them. And it can be everything from what are your group identities, which ones do you know more about, less about, how do you get treated based on different identities. Someone says Gallup has a great work survey. If you're looking to assess inclusion, it's not perfect, but it's robust. And then the playing card activity would have been in the Inclusion 101 handouts. So you just look through the table of contents and find them. So I didn't know which one you meant. So with that, any final anything?
Got a lot of thank yous, but I think we have answered all the current questions.
Woohoo! As always, you're welcome to share these handouts. You'll get a recording of this. You're welcome to use this, all these free ones, in professional development, or just share them to people, send them to people anonymously. I'm half joking. You can let people know they're available on all your websites. To be fair, people do have to give me their email to access, but once they get all the free resources, people can unsubscribe. And then when they want something else, they can subscribe again. I don't care. I just want to ask you to help get this information out. We have to create classrooms and teams that are more inclusive and increasingly inclusive, but we really want to just accelerate and get all the energy and brilliance and learning and team development. I want to change the world. And so thanks for being a part of helping to do that. And so with that, I look forward to seeing you on future webinars and virtual institutes. And thank you for sharing all this widely. With that, all the best to you. Good opening and good fall semester to you, 4th quarter. All the best. Take care.